screen. Dan?
Yeah, I've just put it on record, so we're recording now and I can see the screen, yep.
Perfect. So I think we've got a couple of slides from you first of all, and then what we'll do is we'll get into what IR35 is. I'll take over a little bit and I can run you through from our perspective IR35 and what we see moving forwards and happening.
Perfect. It's actually really nice to see some familiar names popping up on the screen. Elizabeth Tyndall, I've known Liz since probably around 15 years now. I think I was dealing with Liz as a candidate back in 2006, 2007. Great, if everyone could put their microphones on mute, that'd be great, so Leigh can crack on with her presentation. I mean, DMCG Global, we're a recruitment business. We've got offices across the world in 10 different countries now. Daniel Marks had offices in London, New York, Los Angeles, and Amsterdam. We're now part of a wider group. There's offices in Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, Perth, Brisbane, and we recently launched an office in Sydney just this year, led by Simon Hadfield. We're a recruitment business. You know what we do. We specialize in permanent and freelance. Right, let me fix the next. I think you're in charge of the slides, Leigh. Could you fix the next one?
Of course, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so Daniel Marks, MCG and Group and 720, the founders of those three businesses came together to create DMCG Global to offer a more united global offering. So we have global clients that we share. It's better for candidates who are looking to move. It's been tricky to move people this last year, but we're seeing a lot more of that happening now. It just kind of gives us a wider global reach. So we're global, but we're also very local. Our London office has around 25 partners. That's market, creative marketing. Yeah, do you want to click the next slide, Leigh?
Of course.
Yeah, so we have over 120,000 candidates that we represent now. It's quite a few, but we are broken down, like I say, by the 10 different offices. The UK is one of our largest offices. Yeah, so over 15 years I've been doing this for, 20 years now, and I like to think that everyone here has had a positive experience and continues to do so. Yeah, range of clients, both small, medium enterprises, independents, networks. A lot of these clients here are sort of global clients that we work with, but also most of our business, I say a lot of our business these days is the SMEs, startups, smaller businesses who are actually a little less affected by IR35, as we'll find out now. Thank you. And just finally, the disciplines that we cover, we have a range of people here today. Everyone who's on this Zoom has been contacted because you're a candidate that's been registered with us by one of our freelance specialists. It could have been Agatha or Beth in creative, Jack in freelance planning, Marcus project management and production, Kelly in client services. So our specialists are broken down by permanent and freelance, and within each of these disciplines generally, so planning and strategy, client services, data analytics, CX, UX, UI. So these are all the disciplines that we cover. So everyone here today probably fit into one of these different boxes. It's just a quick understanding of what we do and how we do it in our market. So that's it for me. I won't talk for too long. You're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to Leigh. Leigh's brilliant. We've spent a lot of time talking already. In fact, you only found out today that I'm in New York, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
It's quite early for me.
I had no idea.
Yeah, but it's great to have you here. Thank you so much, Leigh. You've been wonderful so far, and the talk you're going to go through, if you've seen a similar version, hopefully it'll answer a lot of questions for people. It's only about 3 weeks away now before this is implemented, and at the end we'll do a Q&A. I'll look at questions that are coming up, make a note as well, and I'll hand the reins over to you. Thank you, Leigh.
Thank you very much. So my name's Leigh. As Dan said, I am the commercial director for Orange Genie. We are an FCSA accredited umbrella company, and what we do is we work quite closely with lots of end clients, but also mostly recruitment agencies, to help contractors like yourself with learning about IR35, but also if you do need to choose an umbrella company, we're here for you. So what I will do first of all, just to touch on the agenda today, I'm going to go over what IR35 is. There's a little bit of confusion sometimes, and especially when I've been doing some of these presentations, there's definitely been confusion around what is IR35. So I'm going to go through that, and then I'm going to touch on a couple of things which will help and hinder your IR35 status. I'm then going to run through a couple of IR35 case studies, Going to touch on what happened in the public sector back in 2017. It has haunted me. And then what is looking likely to happen in the private sector in the reform coming up in April. And then finally, just touch on a few things that we can do together to try and help your clients around IR35 and supporting them as they make your determinations. So first of all, what is IR35, the $1 million question? So IR35 is the name which we used to refer to a piece of tax legislation, which actually came into force in July 2000. And that's kind of one of the main misconceptions that I find when speaking to contractors, is that some contractors think that it's a brand new piece of legislation that's coming in April, and that's simply not the case. IR35 has been around since 2000, and there's not very much about it that's changing. The only thing that's changing is liability and who is liable for that unpaid tax. And that liability is shifting. As it stands at the moment in the private sector, the tax liability in the IR35 determination status comes down to you as the individual. And what is happening is that liability is shifting from you to the fee payer, and the fee payer more often than not is the recruitment agency. So the recruitment agency can be liable for all of that unpaid tax. IR35 is aimed at identifying disguised employees who work through PSCs. PSCs is exactly the same as a limited company, it's just a different way of saying it. Now, there are a couple of key points that we need to consider when looking at IR35. The first is that you are not stuck within your IR35 determination forever. Your IR35 status is actually determined on an assignment by assignment basis. And each time your assignment changes or something in your contract changes, so can your IR35 status. So it's really important to be aware of that. The second thing that we need to consider is that responsibility for deciding on the IR35 status actually changed in the public sector back in 2017. And for whatever reason at the time, it was decided that the private sector would follow afterwards. So the public sector have kind of been getting used to this for the last couple of years. It's all kind of died down now, but it's now coming into play in the private sector. The changes were actually due back in April last year. It was delayed due to COVID. And what Dan was saying at the beginning of this presentation is, when did we know that it was actually happening? We're still going forward as if it's happening. We've heard nothing else to say otherwise. So we are working towards April this year. I don't know if any of you have ever had a chance to look at or have done much research into IR35, but there is something called the CEST tool, and that's HMRC's online tool. And it helps to determine the IR35 status of contractors. Now, come April this year, it won't be you anymore who's deciding whether you're working inside or outside of IR35, but it might be something worth kind of having a look at and becoming aware of. And it's probably something kind of good to start off with, to kind of click through and gain a better understanding of what IR35 actually looks like within your roles. Obviously, I'm going to say this, but there are experts like ourselves that have their own processes to deal with this. Now, there's not just the HMRC CEST tool out there. And what you might find is that you're working for a client who has gone out into the market and they've decided not to use CEST. CEST has a little bit of a bad reputation. A lot of people say it's fundamentally flawed. And what's happened is there's been other tools out there and developed in the marketplace to help determine an IR35 status. And some of these tools have insurance backing. So if this tool spits out that you have an outside of IR35 determination, there will be some insurance that would cover this should you ever be investigated. And Orange Genie have a consultancy side of the business where we're working with a specific tool which has this insurance backing. So it's just worth noting that the CEST tool isn't the be all and end all in determining your IR35 status. Now, when we're talking about IR35, we have to look at case law and case law generally looks at the overall effect. So if you as a contractor act like, look like, and are treated like an employee, then you should be taxed like one. That's the kind of general gist. And I think when I spoke to Dan about this a couple of months ago, that sentence really gained a true understanding with all of you and your team. Like, you really kind of got to grips with what IR35 was at that time. Now, IR35, what helps and what hinders your status as a contractor? All of these points are really important, and IR35 is not a case of you're going to fail or you're going to pass on one singular point. It's kind of about building a picture of your IR35 status, and then almost kind of looking at a scale, and if insiders on one side and outsiders on the other side, where on this scale do you fit? Are you truly inside of IR35? Are you outside? Or kind of are you somewhere in the middle? And it's about working with and speaking to your clients to see if they would be open to amending some of your working practices to reflect an outside of IR35 determination. It's not about just writing something in the contract. HMRC know that everyone's contracts are pretty much IR35 friendly. What they do if they come in and they investigate is look at the working practices. So it's about speaking to your clients so they get a true understanding of what being outside of IR35 actually means. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples because we're short of time today. What I'll do is I'm just going to go through the first row at the top and go into these in a little bit more detail for you. So what we do when we look at the right of substitution, we mean that you as a contractor can substitute your skills and your services for someone who is suitably qualified and skilled. So when we say a help for IR35 in the orange over there, we mean that a help for your IR35 status to push you outside of the legislation, meaning you can work through your limited company, is when the contractor yourself, you can or you will provide and also pay for a substitute when you're unwilling to work. However, a hindrance, which will push you inside the legislation, meaning you have to work through a PAYE option, is when you as a contractor have an obligation to provide those services personally. An example I give is that I couldn't send my mother in today to come and do a presentation to you all. My employer wouldn't allow it at all. I don't think they'd be very happy, and she wouldn't have the skills to come in and talk to you about IR35. So it's whether or not your client would allow you to send in the limited company rather than sending in an individual. And I think that we get a little bit confused sometimes in that as a contractor, you feel that you are interviewing and they are hiring you as an individual. But if you're working through a limited company, what should happen is the client is actually interviewing the limited company as opposed to the individual. And another example is if you were to go to Wix, I think that's a kitchen place, and you said to them, I want my dream kitchen and I want my dream kitchen delivered next month. And I want it to have grey doors and white surface, whatever it might be. You don't really mind who turns up throughout that month to fit the doors or to fit the sink or to fit the appliances. You could have a different person turn up each day, as long as at the end of the month, you got your dream kitchen. And that's the same way that end clients should work with limited companies. They shouldn't be hiring an individual. If any of you have any questions, just write in the chat box and we can go through that at the end. The next thing that we need to look at as a key consideration is the element of control. So this is when you as a contractor decide what, when, where, and also how you do the work. So a help for your IR35 status to push you outside of that legislation is when you are able to establish the scope of services yourself from the outset, when you're able to pick your own working hours, and also if you know how to do the job without any coaching. So that will push you outside the legislation. Whereas pushing you inside the legislation is potentially if you have some skills that you might need some training on, if you don't have full experience within that role, or if you require instruction from the client as to how to do your role, and also if you don't have the element of control. So if you don't, and you are not able to decide what you're doing to deliver that role, or how and where. So it's something to look at in terms of the element of control. The next thing that we need to look at is the element of financial risk. So there needs to be an element of financial risk if you're working through your limited companies. So for example, you would be buying assets to do the job, you would fund training yourself, also to kind of maintain and improve your skill set, or if you would be willing and able to receive and accept a reduced payment for late or unsatisfactory work. So if the work goes wrong, you would be able to deal with those bad debts yourself, and you would rectify any work at your own cost. So that would push you outside the legislation. Whereas pushing you inside the legislation is when everything's provided for you. So you're provided the equipment, you're provided the training, you're provided the insurance by your client. So that will push you inside of that piece of legislation. The next thing is where we've actually had quite a bit of pushback from some of the clients I've been speaking to. And this is where you as a contractor are part and parcel of that organisation. So the top line is where you're staying independent from the client's employees, and you can easily be identified as a contractor. So this is where if you're outside the legislation, you don't attend any staff meetings, you don't attend any functions, you can't go to the Christmas party. If you do go to the Christmas party, potentially you have to pay to attend. You wouldn't go to any events that are run for employees. You really have to be separated and easily identifiable as a contractor. Whereas a hindrance for your IR35 status is when you are entitled to those staff discounts and other perks and benefits. I've had some end clients that have said, oh, well, we've got one contractor who's been on site for 5 years and they won Employee of the Year. No, that's not good for your IR35 status. You really have to be identifiable as a contractor as opposed to one of the members of staff. And that's really important to note. Finally, is the element of mutuality of obligation. And this is where the client is under no obligation at all to offer any further contracts to you, and you are under no obligation to accept any work that is given to you. For me, as an employee of my company, I have to accept the work. So if my boss one day was to say to me, Leigh, I want you to go onto a project or a new project, I can't really say no, I'm employed. Whereas if you are an independent contractor and it's not in your contract that you've signed, you have the right to say no. And that's really important to note when looking and trying to build up your IR35 status. Do you have an obligation to accept any work? So the next thing that I'm going to talk about and kind of go into a little bit more is a couple of case studies. And I find that this really does help to cement the difference between being inside of IR35 and being outside of IR35. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a couple of minutes to read through this and then have a think about some of those key considerations that we touched on before, and see if we can try and pull out whether these examples are inside or outside of IR35. So this first case study is Emma. A manufacturing firm needs someone to maintain and update a new website. It hires Emma to work for 4 days a week, 8 hours a day. The firm provides Emma with a laptop so she can work at the firm's offices or at home with permission. Emma reports to the head of the IT department, and she must follow their style guide format in order to update their website. It's the firm's responsibility to provide and update the software that Emma will need to do her work. And if Emma should have to work longer than her contracted hours, she will be paid overtime. Emma can work elsewhere on the day she is not working at the firm, but only with their agreement. So there's a little chat box somewhere. If any of you want to write, do you believe Emma is inside or do you believe Emma is outside of IR35? What do you guys think? Inside, inside. Okay, so general consensus is in. Good. So what we look at is the elements that we just considered. So we look at the length of contract. There's maintenance. If you are employed or you are asked to do a contract that is maintaining, there's no real end date, there's no deliverable. So we look at the length of contract and that is pushing her inside of IR35. She doesn't have much control. She has to go and ask the firm if she wants to go and work somewhere else. She has someone that she reports to, and she's hired for a specific amount of time. So she's hired for those 3 days a week and that 8-hour day period. Tools and equipment, she doesn't have to provide anything herself. Her client has to provide everything for her. And then there's no element of financial risk to Emma. So if she has to work longer than her contracted hours, she is going to be paid overtime. So everyone, yeah, Emma is inside of IR35. The next case study is Robert. So Robert's taken on by a manufacturing firm to design and build a website. Robert and the firm have agreed a price for the job and also when he's going to deliver that new website. He's going to work from home and he can use his own equipment to complete the task. He can work for other clients, but he does face a contractual penalty if he doesn't deliver the website on time to the agreed standard. And obviously this represents a significant financial risk to Robert if he fails to deliver the final product as agreed. So is Robert inside or outside? Lots of outsides. Excellent. So you're right. Yeah, Robert hasn't got an element of control. He's free to work for whoever he wants. He can work at home. He doesn't have to consult his client at all. He uses all of his own equipment to complete the task. There is an element of financial risk to him if he doesn't complete that project on time. So we're all right. Robert is outside of IR35. Now, what I've found is just it's really important to touch on what actually happens in the public sector and my experience of it and lots of the recruitment consultants I worked with and also lots of the contractors that I worked with at the time when it came into the public sector, what that actually meant and what was the impact to them. So the first thing that we found was that clients didn't actually really understand what IR35 was, more often than not, deciding on the contractors within that organisation. Their status fell on someone that had never heard of that legislation before. And that's quite a big responsibility to decide on X amount of contractors' status. And if they get it wrong, they know that actually they might have some of that liability passed up to them. So lots of end clients didn't really want to take that risk. It was too much for them to take on. So you kind of found that lots of people did do blanket IR35 determinations. And what happened in the NHS and also with TfL was that initially they said, right, everyone is inside of IR35. And then slowly after a couple of months, they kind of backtracked a bit and said, oh, we made a mistake. We didn't really understand IR35. What we will do now is actually change what we've said and determine it on an assignment basis, as opposed to blanketing everyone being inside of IR35. There were a few IR35 challenges, but contractors at that time weren't allowed to challenge their IR35 status determination. So you had quite a lot of independent contractors that were being forced to work one way, where actually they were independent contractors and they should have been allowed to continue to work through their limited companies. Some, this is quite generalised, but some high street accountants had a couple of contractors on their books maybe, and they didn't really understand the rules around IR35, and it became a little bit fraught between the contractors and the agencies, and also the contractors and the umbrella companies that they were essentially being told that they had to join, because their high street accountant, was saying, look, you're a contractor, you should be allowed to work outside of IR35. And the determination had been done by the end client, and the recruitment agency was enforcing that, saying, actually, you're going to be inside. So it did make things a little bit difficult and a little bit fraught. And what we found is that some contractors, especially the ones I spoke to, I did lots of contractor events, were really unhappy. In the public sector at the time, they had the choice to essentially leave their assignment and try and find work in the private sector. This is not going to be the case now. There's nowhere for you guys to go. You can't just up and leave and go off to another sector. All of the sectors now are covered by IR35, and the choice of your determination of your IR35 status no longer falls with you. So there's not many places for you to go. What happened next was that, because you were told that you had your IR35 status and you were determined inside, you had a couple of options. So your first option was sometimes to go in-house agency PAYE, and some contractors chose to do that. Other contractors chose to go through an umbrella company for various reasons, and I'll touch on that right at the end. There was a huge increase in non-compliant umbrella companies, and what you'll find is, if you go onto Google and you Google umbrella companies, you will find lots of offshore loan schemes, umbrella companies offering you ridiculous take-home pay, 90% more than you've been getting through your limited company. And we understand that it's super attractive to go to those organizations. What is less attractive, and what's spoken about a little bit less, is that those organizations can fold with your money, and then how do you get paid? Also, that tax liability can come back to you as that contractor, because those umbrella companies are doing something that they shouldn't. So worth noting that, especially now, lots of agencies, recruitment agencies and end clients are only working with FCSA accredited umbrella companies in order to make sure that their supply chain is super compliant. The final option is what some contractors chose to do, which is to keep their limited company open, but they wanted to be paid inside of IR35. And I did that for a couple of agencies that I was working with. We helped them, it's called the deemed model, we helped them with that. And actually what we found is that there is no financial benefit at all to doing that. If you do the calculations, you actually are worse off keeping your limited company open and working inside of IR35. And the reason for that is, having a limited company is quite expensive. You are paying a higher amount to have an accountant and to do all those calculations. And also you're paying quite a high amount for insurance. Whereas if you go through either agency PAYE or you go through an umbrella solution, the umbrella solutions are far less expensive. So you are actually financially worse off keeping your limited company open. Now, there are some contractors where keeping your limited company open may be suitable, but that will be a very small percentage of people. And that is where you are going to do multiple assignments, and some of your assignments will be inside of IR35 and some of your assignments will be outside of IR35. What we do as an umbrella company is we also have an accountancy side of the business, and other companies offer this also, and it's called Orange Genie Complete. So you join our accountancy service, and then as and when you need to work through an umbrella company for those inside determination roles, we will give you that umbrella for free. So there's lots of different ways that it could be suitable, but keeping your limited company open just to be paid inside of IR35 won't financially benefit you at all. My last comment is that it has settled down over time. In the public sector, it's no longer so fraught. Contractors like yourselves really do understand it a lot more now, and it's now just, we're kind of having lots more conversations with those of you in the private sector and understanding the impact again. So we're kind of reliving it all over again, like we did in 2017. Dan, I think you mentioned a bit earlier about small clients. I think that's what you said. What's happening this time is that the private sector is being brought in line with the public sector, except the reform will not apply to small clients. There's a couple of things that define a small client, which we can send across to you later. It's really, really important to note that IR35 itself is not changing. So as you are working through your limited company now, you have decided, if you are working through your limited company, that you are outside of IR35. That tax liability, that risk currently sits with you as an individual contractor. Come April, that risk is moving across to the fee payer. And by doing this, HMRC have thought, oh, well, it's really hard to target individual contractors and investigate, but it's much easier to target large organizations like DMCG and ask them for their reporting on how many contractors they have going through a limited company. So what HMRC have done is a little bit clever, I suppose. They've moved that liability, and lots of recruitment agencies just don't want that risk. They can't financially take that risk on of having thousands of contractors potentially working in a way that they shouldn't. What happens is that the client must assess the IR35 status. They must take reasonable care in assessing your IR35 status. And then they must pass down that information to the agency. And then what the government believe will happen is that once you've got that determination, the recruitment agency will then go out and look for jobs, or look for contractors, sorry, and advertise those roles accordingly. So they'll believe that the roles should be advertised as inside or outside of IR35. So you know what you are signing up to right from the beginning. The fee payer, who more often than not is the agency, is going to be responsible for deducting tax and all the employee NICs, and also paying all the employer NICs. And liability can move up the chain. So looking at the supply chain of these agencies, clients, if someone's not determining the IR35 status correctly, the liability can move up and down that chain. This time round, you as a contractor are going to be entitled to ask the client for information on how they've reached your IR35 status determination, and you'll also be able to challenge that decision. So that's something worth noting. If you truly believe that you are outside of IR35, then you are able to challenge that decision. I have put an example on the screen of a calculation which is it's a comparison between outside and inside of IR35 earnings. It's based on £240 a day, 5 days a week. Now, this is just an example. It doesn't take into account specific things that you might have. So you might have student loans. So it's really important that you speak to umbrella companies to get your personalised illustration. It's never easy being the bearer of bad news. And I think that umbrella companies like myself, and also Dan, and agencies, they want to make sure that you understand, and we understand, there is a financial impact if you are going to move from your limited company to an umbrella company. And sometimes it comes down to me to explain this, and it's not that we're at fault. We're not deciding your determination. This is a piece of legislation that we have no control over. Now, sometimes, or more often than not, the difference between a limited company and an umbrella or PAYE take-home pay is around 20%. So we understand that you will be around 20% less better off going through a PAYE solution than you would go through your limited company. And this is why it's so important for everyone to understand that we do note that there is a financial impact. Umbrella companies regardless of what they say, and if you do your research on the internet, you will see that there is no magic formula for umbrella companies kind of shifting and fixing and increasing pay. It's not possible. The reason it's not possible is that tax is tax. We can't change that. So if you are getting paid as an employee, sorry, I can hear someone shuffling about. If someone could mute their mic, thank you. We can't change tax. The only difference in your take-home pay that you will find is that some umbrella companies will charge a different margin. So some umbrella companies might charge £20 and the next umbrella company might charge £22. The only difference in your take-home pay should be £2. And there is kind of rough averages that all umbrella companies charge. So you are never going to find a huge difference in your take-home pay. The maximum a week I would say that you'd ever find is about £5, not £105. So if something looks brilliant on the internet, it's probably too good to be true. If you do want to find out your personalized illustration, if you're going to be caught by IR35 and you'd like to know what you would be taking home moving forward so you can start to plan, I've got my email right at the end of this presentation, so just drop me an email and I can arrange for one of my team to give you a call and run through an illustration for you. There's no obligation to sign up to us. You can go away and you can have a look at it and you can mull it over. So just something worth noting. What I would say is your next steps. If your clients have not spoken about IR35 to you and you don't think that they've even looked at it, start asking the question. Start asking if they understand IR35. Have they determined your IR35 status? Is it something that you can help with, or direct them to different websites to help with the education piece? The more that they understand what IR35 is, the more likely it is that actually they will look at the working practices and feel comfortable about adjusting your working practices to make sure you are compliantly working outside of IR35. So that's really important. Make sure that they really understand it. The next thing is maybe direct them to the CES tool. It's free. They don't have to pay for anything if they don't want to pay for anything. There are experts like us, which we offer free discovery days to clients. So if your client has only just realized they need to determine lots of your statuses and they don't know what to do, you can direct them to us and we help educate the clients for you. We are not looking to push anyone inside of IR35. We are not one of those umbrella companies. As I said before, we have lots of different parts of our business. We have an accountancy side where we have nearly 3,000 contractors that use us with their limited company. So we definitely don't want to lose lots of contractors using us for that. So really important in terms of education. Make sure that your working practices support your IR35 status. It can't just be, it looks fantastic on paper and you are super IR35 compliant on paper. It has to be your working practice that reflects that. The reforms are due in April 2021, as we know. The end client is responsible for determining that IR35 status and passing that information down. In this case, it will be to Dan and his team. The fee payer, who is the agency, still has responsibility for deducting that tax. You will need to have an IR35 assessment. Sometimes you might have a case where your client will invite you in to give your view of your IR35 status, and they will make a decision as well from their point of view. What can we do? We're here to help. So we've done this before in the public sector. All of my team are completely trained up to answer any questions that you may have. We are here if you want to look at your personalized illustrations. We do have a benefits portal. It's really important when looking at umbrella companies to realize that although no, we can't change what you're taking home and your net take home pay, umbrella companies have really had to up their game in terms of what they're offering. And with an umbrella company, you have employment rights. You become one of our employees. So you get access to sick pay, You get holiday pay, so you can choose how you get your holiday pay paid to you. You can get that pay each week, or you can put it into a pot and pull it down as and when you want. You get access to maternity, paternity pay. The main benefit of an umbrella company in comparison to agency PAYE is that you're able to build up your credit history. And that's with all compliant umbrella companies. So because you have an employer and you can choose to do as many assignments with them as you want, the umbrella company stays your employer, and then you could choose to do 6 different contracts throughout that year. But when you come to get a mortgage, or you come to get a loan, or you might need a reference from your employer, you come to your umbrella company, and we look after our employees. So we have an obligation to look after you the same way that hopefully this never happens again. But when COVID hit, we had to furlough those eligible, all of our contractors that were eligible for furlough, we furloughed. So it's a little bit different to working through agency PAYE. We make sure the most important thing that you get paid, you are in communication with us, so you get text messages before your pay is coming in. And also we have a benefits platform. So through our platform, we give you 24 hours a day access to a GP. What you do is with the service, it's like what you're seeing advertised on the radio and the television at the moment, where you pay about 50 quid or 30 quid to speak to a GP quickly. We don't charge any of our employees or any of our contractors anything to use that service. So you can add your family onto that. If you need prescriptions delivered to you, if you need a webcam consultation, usually you will get that within an hour to be able to speak to a doctor. So umbrella companies really try and make it so that you feel like you do have an employer. You don't just feel like you're using an umbrella company to get paid. That's my email address. If any of you want to note that down, drop me an email. If you have any questions, any kind of anything you want to clear up, or something specifically related to you, I'm here to answer your questions. And that's it from me. Dan, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Leigh. Thank you so much. That's really comprehensive. You worked through it very thoroughly there. Thank you. We have questions actually from the audience here, which I can, if you scroll to the top of the list, you can see them. If we can work through them, we'll see a bit of a gap in the middle. It might be worth mentioning that some recruitment companies have the option of taking like a cut when they recommend people to you. You gave us the option and we said absolutely categorically not. So anyone we put through to, there's no benefit for us other than assisting you and assisting them. But I would recommend people, if they are using recruiters, that they say, look, you're not making anything from this, are you? Because it's not a lot, but it builds up. We were adamant, everyone was adamant, we don't want that to be the case. I would advise you check that if you are going to be recommended or put forward, that they're not taking a cut on that. It's just really not fair at all. Thank you so much, Leigh. If we go from the top, I mean, you can see the questions there. Or do you want me to read them to you?
Yeah, I'm just going through. I just saw one who said about where you just mentioned, so it might be good to follow on. I've come across certain recruiters stipulating that I can only use certain umbrella companies. Is it legal? Is it going to become common practice? What happens now, especially with compliance recruitment agencies, is that they are putting together preferred supplier lists, and often it is to do with those who have an FCSA accreditation attached to them, because it makes sure that they are being audited. So those who have an FCSA accreditation send their accounts off. They are independently audited. You know that they're doing the right thing. And the reason that some recruitment companies might say, we really think you should use whoever is on their preferred supplier list, it's usually because they're trying to make sure you're not going through anyone who isn't compliant. You can, and I would suggest, if you do have a real preference or you are already using an umbrella company you like, you could always push back to that recruitment company and say, well, my choice of umbrella company is FCSA accredited. Here is them from the website. Would you allow me to use them? And that's probably a fair way to do it. It might be that if you found a fantastic umbrella company, like I said, who is offering you loads more money, the reason they're offering you loads more money probably isn't great, and therefore the recruitment company is making sure that their supply chain is doing the right thing. So that's potentially why they might kick up a little bit more of a fuss. But it's probably good to just ask them, and there's probably quite a few other compliant umbrella companies that they would let you go through. So that's something to note. If the average contract I do lasts 4 weeks and they're different each time, how would an umbrella company manage sick/holiday pay? That's the same with any employer. So if you were to keep joining lots of different contracts, and you're joining, if you're joining lots of different, I've got myself confused. If you're keeping your umbrella company the same, and you are doing lots of different contracts, you're still building up your history. It doesn't matter about you doing lots of different contracts at the bottom. What does affect it is if you join Orange Genie for 4 weeks and then you join another umbrella company for 4 weeks, you're not building up that continuous employment. So it's the same way that if you were to join a new company and you would be a permanent member of staff and the next day you went off sick, they might have something to say about it. And there's a certain amount of time, I believe, that you need to kind of do within a permanent organisation to make sure you're entitled to your sick pay. If you do want any more details, I'll actually go and confirm exactly how many days you need to work in order to be eligible for that. I think that was James that said that. Will agencies stop going direct to candidates and only go through recruiters so they don't become liable? No. I don't believe, I completely understand what you're saying there, Tony, but it makes no difference where the candidates are coming from. It's still down to the client to determine the IR35 status, regardless of the recruitment agency. Sometimes the fee payer shifts to the client, so they are determining that status and also hold all of that liability. So sometimes it might change, but it shouldn't change who is approaching you. Can IR35 be determined partway through doing the work, i.e. you start something outside, but over a period of time, things change? Who would instigate this and who is liable? So yes, each time your contract changes or something in your contract changes, you can reassess your IR35 status, and it's good practice to do so. So your IR35 status could be inside right at the beginning, and then actually something shifts midway through your contract where you're completely independent and you're delivering on a project and no one has any control over you. Your IR35 status can shift from inside to outside. And what you would have to do then is, or your client would look at redetermining your IR35 status. In terms of the liability is not going to sit with you as the contractor to decide whether your role falls inside or outside of IR35. It's still going to be down to the client, and the fee payer is still going to be liable for that unpaid tax. So it's down to them whether they agree that the role is outside of IR35. James said, how is this switchover actually going to work? I have an ongoing contract right now. Will they email me at the start of the financial year? Okay, so James, I'm not sure if you are working through a limited company at this moment, but if you are, you should approach your client and you should ask them, how are they determining your IR35 status? Because it might get to the point where they get to April and they realize, oh, they've not done anything, and immediately force you into a PAYE option. You need to start approaching your clients to have these conversations now so that it's not a rush. And whatever you choose to do with your limited company is obviously down to you. You could close it down, you could make it dormant, or you could keep it going if that's something that you choose to do. And it's just starting to approach your clients to ask them if they've looked at determining your IR35 status. Do you predict day rates could simply increase 25 to 30% to account for inside status? That is the $1 million question. That is down to your client if they are willing to pay. So we have some instances whereby, yes, clients are willing to pay an increased day rate in order to allow for the change of you working from your limited company to your umbrella company. That's the perfect world. Dan, I don't know if you have any experience of what clients are saying in terms of, yes, okay, we'll definitely increase your rate, or no, sorry, you have to take the hit. My experience is it's very few clients that really will pay that increased day rate on top. But what's your experience, Dan?
I think we're going to find out.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll be looking to get more money for the candidate to make up for the money they're not going to be making, and we'll be factoring that into our negotiating when arranging day rates. Obviously, us not taking any cut with you helps the candidate, or not hinder the candidate, but it will be something we'll be looking at, because candidates will have a lower take-home rate, so we can factor that in and try and get more money for the candidate on the day, on the basis that they will be receiving less. So you may see a slight switch in actually day rates being increased to compensate for that. That's the conversation that will be happening moving forwards, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, really, isn't it? And I would love for it to be as easy as clients saying yes, that they will accommodate for that. But the problem is, because some clients are not even looking at contractors' IR35 statuses, they haven't factored that into their budget. And I have been going, I don't know if any of you have seen, I do quite a lot of videos on LinkedIn trying to get clients to understand that they need to start looking at it and prepare for it and factor it into their budgets, so that there's no huge surprise and they do have that budget to uplift rates for contractors should they want to. It's down to your recruiters and yourselves to go down and ask the clients for that.
If there ever was to be a time to increase, this would be it.
Yeah. Do you think it's likely that some creative agencies will be willing to add in the contract that the limited company can find a substitute replacement, knowing full well that the limited company, given their existing relationship, would never exercise this? No. It can't just be put in the contract just in case. It has to be able to be done in working practice. So, for example, if HMRC investigate, they might say, show me a time where you have sent in a substitute to do some work for you. It's not down to the relationship, and I'm sure many of you have fantastic relationships with your clients. That's the complete opposite way, really, that it should work. They're engaging with the limited company, like we said about the kitchen fitter. You shouldn't mind who comes to work on that project for you. Obviously, we all know that in reality, that's not how it works most of the time. They want you because you are fantastic and they interviewed with you and they know the quality of your work. But what we're looking at in terms of the right of substitution is that the complete opposite. It's not you, it's the limited company. So that's a bit more difficult. How harmful to an IR35 judgment is charging a day rate rather than a project rate? That's an interesting question. It's about painting a picture. So a project rate will potentially help your IR35 status, but then so would a day rate. Lots of contractors are still going to be working on day rates. It's really about looking at all of the overall bits and pieces that add up to your IR35 status and seeing where you fall on that scale. And then I think a few people have said a few things. How often do you ever need to send in a substitute? Potentially never, but potentially sometimes. You have some instances where you will have contractors who are working through their limited companies that are doing it now to demonstrate that they are able to, should they ever be investigated, that their client doesn't mind, it's completely fine, and they've demonstrated it's been done before. But it doesn't really matter what you as individual contractors say. You could say, yep, I'll send in a substitute. It's whether your client allows you to. Do they say, actually, yeah, if you would send in a substitute, no problem. We don't mind whoever you send in. They don't have to interview us, just want to come in on that day. Do I think it's going to be harder on the creative industry compared to other sectors? Picking the cheapest, not the best for the challenge, and making us fighting and making us in fight, everyone loses. I think it's the same with all sectors, if I'm honest. It shouldn't be a race to the bottom. I often say this within my industry as well. It shouldn't be that whoever charges the least gets the pick. The clients still want you to deliver very good work. And obviously everything needs to be written down. So lots of things are going to be written down on paper. I don't know if it's going to really affect your industry more than others. You've got lots in the banking industry, for example, that are really heavily affected. And actually, the banks are now saying that they're just blanketing everyone as inside of IR35, and everyone needs to go and find a PAYE solution, which isn't great. Trying to go down some of these. Day rate increases. What are the risks of clients ignoring IR35 compliance? They get investigated and the liability for all that unpaid tax will pass up the chain. So it will pass from the fee payer to the client. And when clients realise this, they're quite quick to make an IR35 status determination for their contractors. If day rates do increase, will recruiters drop their percentage? That's an interesting question. Or will they enjoy the increase in their payment, Dan?
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to say, like, we have for small to medium-sized businesses, we're very flexible. We want to help them grow. For larger companies, like your WPPs, they're very, very fixed terms of business that have gone through various rounds of approval, health and safety, all sorts of things. They're fixed, and they have been, and they don't really change. We're not here to inhibit. We've always said to all of our clients, our main remit is to provide opportunities to people. And I do feel if that was a stumbling block to placement happening, we'll do what we can to help it. But in regards to actually the fee rate that we have, they're kind of fixed in place. They're big contracts that have been arranged as part of a preferred supplier list, as you'd expect. But I wouldn't want anything to inhibit anyone getting a position. But like I said, we haven't come across this yet, so we'll find out what happens next month. But we're not here to, we're catalysts to find people opportunities, and we wouldn't want our fee to be the stumbling block on this. But like I say, with the big networks, it's a very extensive PSL agreement that's arranged in place with fixed amounts. One thing we've always done is make sure that we always adhere to that. I know that some companies are being penalized for expanding quite high margins above what the terms actually are, but we've never done that. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I saw another question from Lawrence right at the beginning saying that he heard some umbrella companies offer you the ability to switch between being paid through a limited company or the umbrella company. Would that make financial sense in the long term if you worked half your time inside of IR35, for example? Potentially, yes. And that's something that when you speak to umbrella companies, you have to work out. So what most umbrella companies will do is provide you with a take-home pay illustration. And once you've got that, you can go away and well, we don't know how much you're taking home going through your limited company unless you're working through our accountancy side. So because there's such a big difference in what you take home through your limited company and what you take home umbrella, you are potentially going to be better off if you are able to do that, and if you are able to switch between the two. With limited companies, you can obviously claim expenses, you can choose how much you get paid, essentially, you can draw down dividends, you really are able to manage your finances. With an umbrella company, it doesn't work like that. How it works is that the money comes across to an umbrella company in an assignment rate. So let's say you get paid £100 a day. The agency send across the money to the umbrella company at £100 a day, and then all of the tax, NI, and the umbrella company's margin is taken off of that assignment rate. That's not your umbrella rate, to give you your pay. So before you get it, exactly like how I get paid, I don't get to choose my tax. I just see it on my pay slip at the end of the month and I see, oh, okay, that much tax has been taken off. That's what umbrella companies do for you because they are your employer. So it's really worth noting that umbrella companies and limited companies operate completely differently in terms of how much control you have over your finances. Is there any sense of which factors have more influence over a decision? The number one factor, if you go onto the CES tool and you look up HMRC CES tool, if you say that you can have a substitute and your client agrees to let you have a substitute, pretty much you are outside of IR35. It kind of puts you in the green and off you go. The other factors are kind of where you build up more of a picture, because having a substitute is such a huge deal, I guess, to end clients. I guess HMRC know that not very many end clients will always allow a substitute. So that's the main kind of golden ticket in terms of substitution. The rest, if you just get one tick against them, doesn't really push you outside of the legislation. That's quite a lot. I think there's a few more. Someone said, does it affect contracts that you're doing outside of the UK? No. I am not an expert by any means in non-UK tax, but my understanding, IR35 doesn't apply to outside of the UK, but you would have to check with someone who is better at non-UK tax than me. Someone has a call. Non-UK clients, are they outside of IR35? You mentioned providing references for employment. Traditionally, a person would reference the agency. Does this mean we would need to reference both agency and umbrella? Well, because the umbrella company becomes your employer, as with anyone who has an employer, you would usually go to the person who employs you. So you could come, and you most often would come to your umbrella company because they are your employer, if you are working through an umbrella organization, as opposed to a limited company where you would need to go to that agency who can say, yes, you did undertake a contract for 3 months and you finished the contract. So you would come to us as your umbrella company.
Leigh, can I just say what would normally happen is if, say, one of the designers or copywriters or our strategists had been freelancing and somebody wanted a reference, they would normally want a reference from somebody who they had reported into and had actually worked alongside them, or could speak to their creative brilliance or their strategic brilliance. Whereas I think what you could offer would be a determination of the fact that they had been employed between X date and X date, and that they had served their contract to the full, and that they hadn't been let go early or they hadn't been dismissed. So I think if it comes to a personal reference where somebody wants to know that you are a brilliant designer and that you can be trusted and that you worked brilliantly on that project, it would always go to the direct agency or the direct employer, whereas Orange Genie or an umbrella company could speak to your mortgage company or to any employer about how long you had actually been employed and if you served the full duration of a contract.
Correct. Yeah, I think I'm coming from it being an umbrella world of references. People come to us for a loan or a mortgage, as opposed to, are you good at your role? Completely right. I got my blinkers on with that one. I think we said again, contractors from outside the UK, are you going to be working inside the UK for the assignments? If so, then yes, you would provide us your visa details and your right to work, and we would look at that and work through that with you. So yes, we work with many contractors who are living in the UK.
One question that's been up twice is actually about the client email address. I'd have thought it would be absolutely fine for them to have a client email address. That wouldn't be restrictive of being an employee, or not, would it?
No. So sometimes it's really not about one thing that you're going to fail on. If the stipulation of the contract is they need to get hold of you because you need to have a client email address, okay, but does everything else push you outside? And you have to remember that it is not yours as a contractor's decision anymore as to your IR35 status. That is in the hands of someone else. So whether you believe it's right or not right, or you think that it's fair or unfair, the determination that they give you, or your client gives you, you have to either you accept it or you challenge it. But once it's been challenged and you are told the decision, it's kind of out of your hands now, and it's down to the client to decide whether or not they think that their email address is kind of a big red flag or not. And clients are most of the time really taking it quite seriously. They are coming to organizations like myself and my consultancy side of the business, and they are spending months and months going through contractors' status determinations. And with the piece of software that we use, it invites contractors in to give their view of the role. It gives the managers a view of their role as well. They are taking a lot of time, care, and I guess they're very serious about making the right determinations. And as long as you have a client willing to learn and willing to adapt and agree to some working practices, that's brilliant. We're finding some end clients are actually, they think that they're going to upset contractors if they don't include them as part and parcel of that organization, that they want everyone to feel included, that they want everyone to feel like they can come to the Christmas party, or that they should be invited to all staff meetings, or that person should be in charge of hiring or firing. And it's down to education of actually some contractors are happy to not be treated as part of the organization in order to get the benefits of working through their limited company. So as long as you've got a client who's willing to listen and willing to learn, fantastic. We don't have much more time. So my advice is to go away and speak to your client now. If they've had no mention of IR35, ask them why, or ask them what they're doing about determining your status if you are working through a limited company. If they decide that you're inside of IR35 and your options are PAYE and that's it, please feel free to drop me an email or get in touch with Orange Genie, and we can provide you with a take-home pay for your work. If it is down to a case of you need your day rate adjusted, that's not down to the umbrella company. That's down to you to go back to your recruiters and say, are you able to get me an increase in my day rate to accommodate for the loss that I'm making? If they can't, then whatever rate umbrella companies get is what we then take off the deductions and pay you for.
Just quickly, Leigh, one thing here, it says justify that employers' national insurance are deducted from the contractor's pay. That's not the case, is it? I mean, the contractor will not have their employer's national insurance taken from their pay. That's not legal, is it? The employer pays them their national insurance. It's not subtracted from the contractor's pay.
No, you're wrong, unfortunately. What I can do, let me just, or if someone wants to look at it, we are getting inundated with questions. It's just the way that it's shown on the pay slip. So umbrella companies have to show that employers' NI is deducted, the same way that employers' NI is off my pay slips as well as being a permanent member of staff. I put a page on, let me just try and get the web link.
They're paid in addition to the salary, so it wouldn't be deducted from the contractor's pay. The employer would pay their national insurance on top of the pay for the contractor. On
top of the pay. Okay, so the money that comes across to an umbrella company is the umbrella assignment rate, and everything, all the tax deductions is taken off of that assignment rate. Does that make sense? So it's not, basically employers have to pay employers' NI to HMRC in respect of the employee's pay. and I think that's 13.8%. So a lot of the questions that we get is about the real misunderstanding about the rates that the contractors are paid. And you have to know that the assignment rate is the rate that, as a recruiter, you pay the umbrella company, and it includes the contractor's pay and the umbrella company's margin and all of the costs, including the employer's NI that they have to pay. Now, the contractor's pay is the amount paid to the contractor by the umbrella company, and it's made up of that assignment rate, less the umbrella margin and all of the cost. And the reason that contractors have to pay employers NI is, no, technically you're not paying it. NI is paid by the contractor's employer, but that is paid by the umbrella company. So because we become the contractor's employer, we are essentially paying it, but it comes across in the assignment rate. Does that make sense?
That's clarified it, yeah.
The confusion is normally when the contractor is given the assignment rate as the amount that they will be paid. And when it looks, or when that happens, it looks like to the contractor that they're paying the umbrella company's margin and costs, which obviously would be really unfair if that was true. There's a thing called the key information document, which has come into play now, and it basically outlines how pay is calculated to contractors. And every contractor that works through an umbrella company must receive a key information document before they accept an assignment. So because the key information document has come into play, it should be really rare that there's any confusion around this. It's a little bit tricky, and if you want to Google the employer's NI and why it looks as if contractors are paying it, you can do so. And I've done a huge amount of work trying to clear it up. And actually, I've got a little PDF that I can send out to everyone if they want to clear it up. Does a key information document only apply if you're working inside of IR35? Yes. Dan mentioned big companies like WPP. I'm of the understanding that they are doing the blanket inside. Yeah. Is it fair or legal if you feel you're outside? It might not feel fair, but it might be what they're choosing to do. You could contest it, whilst I think they have 45 days to come back to you though, so it's quite a lot of time. So the WPPs of the world win and the contractor lose. Yes, I agree with you. It's not fair, especially if companies are blanket determining their roles as being inside of IR35. Either you increase your day rate, or someone gets in front of WPP to say, look, this is a really specific role that is definitely outside of IR35. Would you be willing to have someone work outside of IR35? Whether or not it happens is different, but I hope it does. Steve, I'm just sending you a link about employers NI. Hopefully that is helpful. Since you're an umbrella company and employer, to maintain your employees, will you also aid in a vacancy pool? Do you still charge when there is no work? No. So if you are working through any umbrella company, you do not pay unless you are submitting timesheets. So you can join up to us today and you will pay absolutely nothing. The only time you ever pay an umbrella company is when your timesheets have been submitted, and that's when the margin is deducted. You are not charged just to work through or be signed up to. Lots of end clients have actually sent over contractors to us to join us before April. They're still working through their limited companies up until April, but they've joined us. So as and when April the 6th comes around, they basically press go and we have got everyone's details on the system in order to pay them. So no, we don't charge. I'm not sure I know what you mean about aiding in a vacancy pool. Maybe that's terminology I don't understand. Dan, if you know what that means, that would...
I think it means if they're not actually working, they're doing something else, then
oh,
get charged like on a contract. It's not a contract, is it? It's not like a monthly fee. It's
No,
only
no,
depending on that.
no. More often than not, it's weekly, but we pay monthly. We don't have anywhere we don't. Umbrella companies usually do or look after many different industries. So we work with scaffolders to really techie IT, to creative industries, to vets. I had a phone call this morning with a very large veterinary group where we are talking about exotic animals and insurance that looks after them. So umbrella companies have huge amounts of contractors that we're not trying to place anywhere. Is it true that small companies don't need to consider IR35? Yes. If so, at what size do they have to start making IR35 determinations? Good question. I have to remember it. I don't want to say the wrong thing to you. If you give me 1 second, small.
I think it's like 50 people.
Under 50 people, and it's under 10.2 million turnover, I think.
Yeah.
But I just want to quote the right thing, so I'm giving you the right answer.
It's not that small. Like, you can be a reputable size of company and still not have to do this. It's not like a 10-person, it's like a 50-person size and quite a substantial turnover.
So turnover is not more than 10.2 million. The balance sheet total not more than 5.1 million, and no more than 50 employees is the way that they determine a small company. Can I work with my limited company and umbrella for specific projects? If you mean, can you keep your limited company open and mix between the two? Yes, but you are only going to be paid through one of them. So if you keep your limited company open, you're going to be working on outside of IR35 roles. If you go through an umbrella, you're going to be doing inside roles. This is the perfect world. It's a very small percentage of people that are going to have the luxury of being able to do inside and outside of IR35 roles. We don't often see it. Maybe we will see it a little bit more in the private sector than we do the public sector, and I guess only time will tell. So if you wanted to kind of put your limited company dormant for a while, whilst you take IR35 roles that are inside, it might be worth it for you. Can you run
Leigh, if somebody was working with a small independent agency, 30 to 50 people, and it was less than the 10.2 turnover, they may get, say, 3 or 4 weeks work a year with that agency. Then they may work within a bigger group of over 1,000 employees, where the role would be determined to be inside IR35. So that could, in theory, for a designer or a copywriter or an account manager or a strategist, for instance, in an agency, that could happen a number of times each year. So I guess they could keep their limited company going for any of the smaller businesses that they're working with, and then work through Orange Genie or PAYE umbrella company provider for any of the bigger contracts. Would you say?
Correct. Yes, I don't know how your industry works in terms of how many small clients there are. And you as a contractor would have to make that decision if it's worth you keeping your limited company open, because as fantastic as it is to take an outside of IR35 role, with the money that you're paying your accountant, is it worth it? And you have to really be on top of, I guess, your finances to weigh up, is it worth it at the kind of bottom line for those 4 weeks a year you might get with a small client to do the rest of the time with larger clients? Is it worth it? Someone said, can you run through some clients that are outside IR35 through your limited company and others that are inside through an umbrella company? Are there financial ramifications? There are thousands of companies. It would not be a client that necessarily is outside of IR35, it would be a role. So if you are speaking to recruiters, you would ask them if that specific role is outside. I wouldn't be able to kind of say, oh, Tesco is making all of their roles outside. It doesn't work like that. It's literally down to the role that the client's choosing. If I have to payroll running for a limited company and payroll for umbrella at the same time, will this ring alarm bells for HMRC, even if 1 week I'm working outside and the next week I'm working, I assume, inside, but I need to pay in both ways? So it shouldn't ring alarm bells, because it should show and demonstrate to HMRC that you are aware that there is a difference in inside and outside roles. With what we offer, we're not asking you to pay for the umbrella company. So you move over to our limited company and then you get the umbrella for free. Obviously, it's far more costly if you are then paying for an umbrella solution as well as paying for your limited company solution. So as fantastic as I think that Orange Genie are, there are other companies that offer something similar to us. And obviously go away and do your research. And there are umbrella companies that offer this service where you can do both. I'm selling against myself here. But it shouldn't ring alarm bells for HMRC. It should go, oh, actually, they are doing their best to work in the most compliant way that they can. Can you work outside of IR35 as a sole trader for smaller companies as well as inside IR35 for larger companies? I don't deal with sole traders, so I'm not the expert. Most agencies that I know and I work with don't actually allow the contractors that they deal with to work with sole traders, to work as sole traders. So I might have to back away from that answer, Nick. I don't know too much about sole traders. Dan, do you work with sole traders or?
Yeah. It's a tricky one. I would say that I'd categorize them as the limited business because they're trading in the same way that as a sole trader. So you don't deal with sole traders at all?
No, as in many of the agencies that we deal with categorically refuse to work with sole traders.
Yeah. I would put them in the, if I had to choose, I'd put them in the limited box.
Okay.
Or I'd recommend if they were a limited company, would they be able to? So the same question, but as a limited business, can they work for smaller companies inside and outside for larger? So what would be for that?
It would be the same. What I might do, just so I'm not holding myself to ransom here, is I'll find out a little bit more about sole traders. It's not something I come up against really ever, but I'll find out. And then if I feed back to Dan, maybe Dan can go back with just some feedback at the end of an email to you all.
I would say treat sole trader as a limited business because they are a sole trader, but they're acting like a limited business. So if they're working for the company, they could be considered an employer. So if the question was, can you work outside of IR35 as a limited business for smaller companies, as well as inside for larger clients, what's the answer to that?
The status is an issue for sole traders. I would need to, it says the main difference is that the end client would foot the bill if they were deemed to be disguised employees. So it seems that IR35 still does affect sole traders. I would have to go away and research that.
Yeah, I'd have thought it would, or else it'd be a loophole and everyone would.
Fine.
We should probably wrap up with a couple of questions, Leigh, because your brain must be fried.
I spend all day, every day. I dream about IR35 and have done since 2017. I am the world's most boring person.
One more question here. Maybe we wrap it up, and it had been a full 90 minutes of your brain being active, which is impressive. Thank you.
No problem. One thing, apprenticeship levy. Yes, it's the same thing. It's part of being employed. Some people weigh it up and think, oh, yeah, I really like the benefits that an umbrella company offer. I would rather do that than go through agency PAYE because I get benefits. Others say, no, I'm only going to contract for 3 months and then I want a perm job. I'm very happy going agency PAYE. I'm not in contracting forever. So that, I think I've seen James. One more question. To what extent do we need to modify our agreements? Timings, fee structure, where we work, equipment in contract or scope of work? Is it a problem if all this was agreed in email/verbally? James, it is not down to you to modify anything. It is down to the client to determine your status. So you could do all of the right things and modify everything and make it look fantastic. But ultimately, if your client says you are inside of IR35, we do not accept that you can send in a substitute. We do not accept that you have control over the work. We tell you what to do and we consider you our employee. It doesn't matter. So it's down to your client to decide your IR35 status, unfortunately, not you as an individual contractor. If anyone needs anything, you're very welcome, everyone. Thank you for being so lovely. Send me an email, leigh.stuttman, leigh.stutman@orangegenie.com, or just add me on LinkedIn. I'm always there sending videos talking about IR35, obviously. If you want an illustration from us just to find out what your new day rate could potentially look like, just drop me an email and I will get one of my team to give you a call.
Leigh, thank you. For us to share the presentation, I was going to email the recording. There's around 90 something people who are signed up to attend today, so I'll be sending that to them. You happy for me to attach the presentation? Well, great.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you all. And I'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you.